Thousands of years ago, a huge meteor weighing 2 million tons crashed into Earth at a speed of around 56,000 miles per hour. Sounds like a big deal, and it was. It actually created Lonar Lake in Maharashtra. When you see it from above, it might look like any other lake, but the sand there is magnetic, and it makes compasses go haywire. First off, it's a soda lake. Nah, it's not filled with Coke. It's just another name for an alkaline lake. The pH levels there vary from 9 to 12, whereas humans enjoy ranges from 6.5 to 8.5. So it's not really advisable to bathe there, not to mention to drink such water. There's a little round dip about 2,300 feet away from the main lake, which folks think was made by a piece of the main meteor. Near this lake, there is a Hanuman temple that has an idol carved from rock, and it's said to have some pretty strong magnetic vibes. Also, local farmers are draining water from Ambar Lake. Sometimes people refer to this lake as Chota Lonar, which means Little Lonar. This nearly perfect oval is one of only 2 natural craters in the world made entirely from basalt, a dark, finely textured volcanic rock. The water there is 7 times saltier than ocean water, and sometimes the lake can turn pink due to particular bacteria. Whenever you open up a tap to fill a glass of water, water goes from top to bottom because gravity, duh. It's hard to imagine it acting the other way around, but turns out there are many waterfalls that can defy gravity and go in the opposite direction. That's called a reverse waterfall, and it happens when super strong winds whip through a waterfall, pushing the water back up. It's especially common for those windy fall and winter months. You usually need winds of at least 46 miles per hour to see this cool trick in action. It's actually not as rare as one may think, and you can find these wild reverse waterfalls all over the globe, from Australia to India, Japan, the UK, and the US. In Australia, in areas like Sydney, the Central Coast, and Royal National Park, winds around 43 miles per hour have been known to turn waterfalls upside down. Yep, it's all about the wind going this fast. Please put aside all those weird myths about Australia being in the southern hemisphere, like the one about the water in the toilet flushing in the opposite direction. This is nothing but an urban myth. In India, near Mumbai, and in places like Sandan Valley and Amboli Hills, waterfalls get blown upward during the monsoon. And if you're ever in the Faroe Islands, you can witness this unique phenomenon happen regularly due to the region's geography and fierce winds from the North Atlantic. Magnetic Hill in Ladakh, India, is a fascinating spot, sitting at about 14,000 feet high, right along the Srinagar-Leh Highway, just 16 miles from Leh City. It's known for a quirky gravitational trick where parked cars mysteriously roll uphill when left in neutral, defying logic and catching the attention of visitors from all over. Locals have their own myths, viewing it as a path between heaven and earth. You'll want to stop by between June and September when the weather is just right and the optical illusion effect is at its peak, typically from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. In Brazil, there's this street called Rua do Amendoim that seems to defy the laws of physics, leaving many puzzled as they walk or drive down it. Locals affectionately call it Peanut Street, and there's never a shortage of parking spots. That's mainly because if a car is parked without the emergency brake, it starts to roll uphill all on its own, picking up speed as it goes. People have all sorts of wild theories about why this happens. Some say the hill is haunted, while others think there's a huge iron ore deposit beneath it pulling cars up like a magnet. But believe it or not, the truth is that this strange occurrence is just an optical illusion. The street looks steep, but it actually has a slight dip. So, while it seems like cars are rolling uphill, they're really just going downhill. Still, that hasn't stopped folks from filming countless videos of this quirky sight. Located on the beautiful Black Sea coast, Ureki is a chill beach resort town known for its unique magnetic sands that are all about health and wellness. These sands have been getting attention for their healing powers since the 1800s, helping people tackle various health issues. Ureki's magnetic sand is packed with minerals like magnetite and quartz. It's got an unusual magnetic content of about 23%, making its magnetic field way stronger than that of regular sand. The Hessdalen lights are mysterious glowing orbs seen in a 7-mile stretch of the Hessdalen Valley in central Norway. These lights have been popping up since at least the 1930s and can be spotted both day and night. They usually shine in bright white, yellow, or red and can hover, move quickly, or sway gently. Their appearances can last from a few seconds to over an hour. Though there were many sightings, especially between 1981 and 1984, the frequency has gone down to about 10 to 20 a year as of 2010. Various groups, like Project Hessdalen, have tried investigating these lights since 1983, using methods ranging from field studies to scientific research. As for what these lights actually are, no one really knows for sure. Some sightings have been explained away as things like car headlights or astronomical objects. One theory suggests they might come from a chemical reaction involving airborne dust from local mines. Another idea is that they could be clusters of particles interacting in a specific way due to the area's geology. Some researchers have even proposed that the lights might be a result of piezoelectricity due to certain rock types in the valley. Other theories include complex interactions between electromagnetic waves and dust, which could explain the light's unique shapes and colors. Saharan dust, which once even made its way to parts of the UK and left a red layer on cars, is full of naturally magnetic materials. On September 7, 2023, some folks noticed their cars were covered in reddish flecks because of the dust blown from the Sahara. A video making the rounds on Facebook showed someone using a magnet to lift the dust off their car. One commenter even got pretty heated, saying, "If you want to know what fell down last night, just grab a magnet and check this out," insisting it was metal, not sand. Naturally, this sparked chatter about how the dust's magnetic properties could be linked to chemtrails. But guess what? Experts are clear that magnetism is actually normal for Saharan dust. According to Professor Barbara Marr from the Center for Environmental Magnetism and Paleomagnetism at Lancaster University, the dust carries a mix of particles from the African ground and some air pollution as it heads to Europe and the UK. The red color is due to hematite, a weakly magnetic mineral. Sure, the dust can pick up some human-made magnetic particles along the way, but scientists say those are usually way less abundant than the naturally occurring ones. The whole chemtrails idea, which suggests planes are intentionally spraying harmful substances, is based on conspiracy theories that have been thoroughly debunked. In short, the presence of magnetic particles in Saharan dust, like that of hematite giving its reddish tint, doesn't back up the chemtrail theory at all. Not having the internet in 2024 seems sorta abnormal, right? When we talk about internet access, it primarily comes down to wired connections, mobile networks, and satellites. Fiber optic cables connect most of the world, except Antarctica, and many small islands. Mobile networks are also widespread. Even in remote areas like the Sahara, you might find patchy access. For people in rural spots, satellite internet is often the best bet, even if it's slower. Still, there are a few truly isolated spots left. Deep caves like Georgia's Krubera Cave are internet-free due to their depth. And under the ocean, signals struggle to get through, making internet access poor or non-existent.
1,000 years ago, near modern-day St. Louis, Missouri, there was a vibrant, bustling city called Cahokia. It was a Native American city, the largest and most influential one in Mississippian culture. At its peak, around 1050 BCE, Cahokia was home to as many as 30,000 people, making it larger than Paris at the time. But what's interesting is that Cahokia didn't have any big marketplace. Usually trade was the backbone of any big city, yet this one stood out for archaeologists. That's because Cahokia wasn't about commerce. It was about culture, community, and parties. The people who lived there threw massive parties that would last for days. The city's grandest feature was its 50-acre plaza, surrounded by amazing earthen pyramids. This massive space could hold over 10,000 people. Imagine them all gathering there for festivities, dancing, drinking coffees and teas, feasting on deer, and betting on sports. The events were super lively. Cahokians would wear awesome costumes, style their hair in interesting ways, and decorate their bodies with tattoos. Athletes were playing a game called chunky, where they hurled spears at a rolling stone disc, competing to get as close as possible. The roar of the crowd filled the air, and performers showed off their skills. These celebrations were so wild, they left traces in history. After the parties ended, Cahokians cleaned up by tossing leftovers into pits. Archaeologists have uncovered these waste pits, and they were filled with food remains and pottery. One pit alone contained the remains of 2,000 deer, and that's from a single event. They also found traces of yaupon holly, a caffeinated plant that was traded from hundreds of miles away. This just shows how much effort and thought Cahokians put in their celebrations. Would you like to live in a city like this? But aside from all the fun and games, Cahokia was also deeply complex and spiritual. The city was built on a landscape that mixed dry land with swampy patches. Many people believe that this symbolized the connection between the world of the living and the dead. The people of Cahokia saw their city as a bridge between these two realms. They built earthen mounds, both for ceremonies and rituals, and as construction support. These mounds rose from the swampy areas. Meanwhile, people settled in the drier spots. Elevated pathways connected these neighborhoods, creating a physical link between life and death. Isn't it sad that some ancient metropolises that rival modern cities in scale just disappeared? Cahokia's story came to a quiet end around 1350 CE, when the city was abandoned, all due to changes in environments and weather, floods, and other problems. But the influence of Cahokia was so big, it spread to distant places. Some of their traditions, like chunky and yaupon tea, have survived in native communities to this day. Today, Cahokia is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's not the only megacity we lost. About 5,000 years ago, people in the Indus Valley built some of the world's first cities. Mohenjo Daro was an ancient city in what is now Pakistan. The city was built around 2500 BCE, and back then, it was a thriving hub of the Indus civilization. Sure, it was much smaller than modern cities, but it was quite huge at the time, around 40,000 inhabitants. It looks like the locals were crazily strict and disciplined people. The city's planning and organization were incredible. It was laid out in a grid pattern. Streets and important buildings aligned along the north-south axis, probably to match the movement of the sun and moon. They also built one of the most advanced systems for water and waste management of their time. The city had about 700 wells. Nearly every house had its own. Most homes also had private bathrooms with drainages and even underground sewers. This shows how skilled these people were at staying clean. And with all this discipline, it looks like there were no kings, queens, or even a central government. They could still have some authority, like local elites or elected officials, just not a classic strict monarchy or religion. Instead, people there cared about simplicity and order. They basically managed themselves, having standardized ways of doing things, from the way tools and potteries were made to how they traded. Which is why, unlike many other cities, Mohenjo Daro didn't have grand palaces, temples, or monuments. Instead, they had public areas known as citadels. People gathered at citadels for rituals, meetings, and storage of grain. And it seems like this way of life worked perfectly. Scientists found some seals and weights, which means the economy was well regulated. Archaeologists found some intricate artifacts like ivory, lapis lazuli, carnelian beads, and gold jewelry. Another famous find is the small bronze statue known as the Dancing Girl, which was discovered in 1926. Mohenjo Daro wasn't poor at all. And they also pulled off some awesome buildings. Staying clean was clearly way more important to them than displays of wealth or power. So they created the Great Bath, one of the most famous structures in the city. It's a large, watertight pool built with baked bricks, perched on a mound of earth, being almost a religious place, the closest thing they had to a temple. Meanwhile, the city itself was built on a series of mounds. They grew taller over the centuries as people added new houses and structures. Why did the city fail? No one really knows. There's something mysterious about the sculptures archaeologists found. Many of them seemed intentionally broken. This means the city's later inhabitants, maybe invaders or something, destroyed them for some reason. Some scientists think that the Indus River may have shifted course, disrupting agriculture and trade. But there's no evidence of a flood or any big event like this. It just seems like, over time, the entire Indus civilization just gradually faded away. By 1900 BCE, the culture had shifted and didn't leave much behind. Let me tell you now about the ancient city of Kos, which is located where the modern town of Kos now stands in Greece. Imagine arriving by sea, and the first thing that hits you is the sheer grandeur of its agora, this massive public square built with stones in different colors, laid out on terraces that rise above you. It was one of the biggest in the ancient world, and it made a great impression on anyone approaching the city. This place has a rich history, dating back to around 2300 to 2200 BCE. A long time ago, local folk gathered up from different parts of the island to form a new city in the northeast. People have lived there since the Bronze Age, and over time, it became a super important center of culture and trade. And no wonder, since it's right near a natural harbor. The harbor was sheltered by two breakwaters, and people built some of the most important religious sites there, including the sanctuaries of Aphrodite and Hercules. Kos wasn't just beautiful, though. It had some brilliant design. The whole city was laid out in a neat grid, with streets crossing each other at perfect right angles, literally looking almost like a modern city. Thanks to this, moving around was super easy, and the blocks, or insulae, were big enough to fit several large houses. Kos remained largely unchanged until the 6th century CE. Over time, it started gradually shrinking in size, confined within the walls of what is now the Chora neighborhood. Meanwhile, Palmyra was an ancient city built around a beautiful oasis sometime around the 3rd millennium BCE. Originally known as Tadmor, this city flourished as a major stop on the Silk Road, linking the Near East with Asia. It was a thriving center of trade and culture. They had a marketplace, assembly buildings, grand gates. In other words, this place was bustling with life. The city has been through many hands throughout its history, from the Byzantine to Arab caliphates, which is probably why it had some awesome architecture. An interesting blend of Greco-Roman, Persian, and Arabic vibes. The Temple of Bel, the Great Colonnade, and a Roman-style theater. But, like all the others, it decayed over time. Palmyra's importance faded, and by the early 1400s, it had been largely destroyed. But at least its ruins remained. Right now, they're a UNESCO World Heritage Site. You'd be surprised to find out the life-changing discoveries a person can make just by browsing Google Maps. Like this guy, who found a suspicious crater and might have made a major scientific discovery. In 2024, Canadian Joël Lupoint was planning a casual camping trip in his homeland. He opened Google Earth and zoomed in Quebec's Côte-Nord region. That's when he saw it, this unusual rounded structure. The measurement was impressive, 9.3 miles from one point to another, and there seemed to be a lake next to it. He was quick to print the screen and sent the image to a French geophysicist to see if he knew anything about it. Most times these images turn out to be nothing, or simply Google Earth watermarks. But he was surprised when he opened his email and saw the scientist's reply. The geophysicist said that, judging by the looks of the topography, Lapointe could have discovered a meteor impact area. Now, impact areas are really hard to identify. Since they've been around for millions of years, most of their shapes have been heavily changed by erosion. Scientists call these areas impact structures. They're usually circular or crater-like and are made up of deformed bedrock. It happens when a meteor falls into the surface of the Earth. Here's the thing. Since the crater has huge walls around it, these areas are usually mistaken for mountain ranges. That's what left the Canadian explorer confused. But the French geophysicist that analyzed the case gave him hope. That weird formation in Quebec had been classified as a type of volcanic formation. After Lapointe brought this subject back to the agenda, scientists had to dig a little deeper to find the truth. Until this recent discovery, scientists thought the area looked like that due to some volcanic formation. This is actually normal, since other things such as volcanism and sinkholes can be mistaken for impact craters. To verify, they asked for some samples of the site. This is a more reliable way to fact-check whether a meteor landed there or not. When the meteor hits the Earth, it brings different types of minerals from outer space. That's the wonderful thing about impact craters. They reveal a link between Earth and the outside universe. By now, scientists have cataloged most of the minerals that are native to our planet. When they're searching for an impact structure, they usually look for things such as tinnite and chemisite, which can only be found in meteors. The biggest known impact crater in the world is the Vredefort crater, located in South Africa. This big thing was formed some 4 billion years ago. The asteroid that made it is estimated to have been one of the largest ever to strike planet Earth. When the researchers got the results of the site back in Canada, they did confirm that it contained zircon, a mineral that tends to show areas of impact. There's no way to guarantee that Lapointe really found an impact crater, but scientists are organizing a research mission over to the area just to make sure. If it turns out that it really is an impact crater, that's pretty huge news, since the last discovery was made in 2013. Another one of these mesmerizing discoveries came from a 15-year-old boy. William Goddery was also a Canadian, and for some reason loved looking for long-lost Mayan cities. Different from the previous story, William had an intention and a research methodology. He had studied many books on Mayan civilizations. He believed that Mayans built their cities in relation to the stars in the sky. So he opened a book and mapped all the cities that have already been unearthed. And that's when he noticed something important. There is an area in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico where archaeologists have unearthed 2 Mayan cities. But on the constellation map, there are 3 stars. He thought to himself, could this mean there is a lost city waiting to be discovered nearby? William Goddery is known to be a science genius and has even won an award for this constellation theory. When he noticed that a 3rd city was missing from the 23rd constellation he was examining, he began to search Google Earth for satellite pictures that could help him solve this mystery. Advances in satellite tech have shed new light on long-lost Mayan cities such as Tikal. Located in the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan Empire. He had hopes, so he reached out to a friend inside the Canadian Space Agency to verify what he had found. Since he had already won awards for his research, he had friends in high places, and that's when things got interesting. According to the images, there was a large square area on the border of Mexico and Belize that looked like the remains of a city. William took the images to a remote sensing expert. They studied the images thoroughly and concluded that the area could be housing 30 buildings and even a large pyramid. William named the new city discovered as Mouth of Fire. However, his theory was very much contested inside the archaeological community, and many Mayan experts worked to debunk William's findings. Experts say that constellation theories are too unscientific. Renowned anthropologists and astronomers said Williams' methodology was an act of creative imagination. Still, a 15-year-old teen almost found a long-lost Mayan city, which is pretty exciting if you ask me. What about these tiny dots that appeared on images of Google Earth? These strange spotted circles were found in the middle of the Algerian desert. A YouTuber browsing on Google Earth found these circles and discovered that people had been debating over their origin for years. He thought they were a glitch from satellite images. There are dozens of them, stretching for miles and miles in a straight line. They're far away from any town, road, or human activity, making it hard to understand if it was man-made or just a natural phenomenon. To settle this mystery, he interviewed the people who took Google Earth's pictures. He found out they were 100% true. The circles were there in real life. They appear in multiple pictures from multiple years. Now, at first, he guessed they were the result of oil activity. Algeria is a rich area for natural resources, so this made sense. To find out if the area is worth extracting, companies usually undertake seismic surveys. They're a way of analyzing the Earth's surface by sending shock waves into the ground. Depending on how these waves bounce back, you'll know what is located underground. There was another possibility. The Sahara is a very dry area of the planet. The average high temperatures in summer are over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. To survive there, people need to find ways of accessing water. So, his second guess was that the circles were kind of ruin or leftover from ancient water wells. But when he talked to an expert, he found out they weren't ancient water wells. You can see some of these traditional constructions in other cities on Google Earth, and they look really different from the mysterious circles. He decided to travel over to Algeria to find out the truth. He drove 99 miles into the heart of the desert, and when he gets there, he sees it. A huge crater dug on the sand, surrounded by 12 smaller holes. It kind of looked like the ancestor of a modern clock. There, he found something he couldn't spot on Google Earth: thin metal wires. When the curious YouTuber and his teams started to dig in the sand, they found old dynamite and some sardine cans. Apparently, they were hiding the truth. The Sahara circles, as they were famously called, were not the historical leftovers of seismic surveying. Back at the time when these circles were made, this technology didn't even exist, but they were sure related to oil exploration. The dynamite holes were an ancient method of oil searching, and the sardine cans, well, they were left by the workers who were exploring the region. Another Google Earth mystery solved.
Phew, you can finally send that last report for the day and breathe out. The weekend is around the corner. But just when you're about to hit send, you're alarmed by the low rumbling under your desk. Is it the light rail passing by? Unfortunately, that's not the case. It's a volcano speaking. What, here? In Arizona? That's right, the ground keeps shifting under Arizona, reminding us that Earth is alive. No panic though, let's arm ourselves with some context. 20 American states have extinct, active, and dormant, currently sleeping, volcanoes. Among such states, you can find California, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado. On the bright side, Arizona's volcanoes are dormant at the moment, but it doesn't mean they won't go off in the near or not so near future. Now, how about traveling to Arizona to check the traces of its active volcanic past? They dot the desert landscapes of this state like spots dot a Dalmatian. There are entire volcanic fields southwest of Phoenix, east of Douglas, near Flagstaff, north of Kingman, and near the Mexico border. The most worrying thing about these fields is that even though they're not active at the moment, eruptions in this region might happen every 1,000 years or so. Well, the time seems to be up. The last powerful and destructive volcanic eruption occurred around 1,000 years ago at the Sunset Crater. Oh, this place is worth paying more attention to. And we will, but a bit later. First, we have to talk about hotspots. No, not that place where you can surf the web. In our volcanic context, a hotspot is a place where insane amounts of heat melt the overlying crust, Earth's thin outer layer, and form volcanoes. This heat rises from the mantle, which is located between our planet's dense, superheated core and the crust. Want to see an example of this type of volcanism? Welcome to the Hawaiian Islands. The Big Island has its active volcanoes because, at the moment, it's situated on top of the Hawaiian hotspot. The older Hawaiian Islands were once there too, but later they drifted off towards the northwest. It happened because that's where the oceanic crust on top of which they sat, namely the Pacific Plate, moved. Now, look at the world's ocean basins. Yes, they're literally dotted with islands that sit on top of hotspots, like Hawaii, Iceland, Samoa, the Galapagos. Those are probably the most famous examples. But don't think that continents can't host hotspots. They can, but those are far less common. One of the most famous continental hotspots is, I bet you know it. Yep, the one beneath the Yellowstone caldera. By the way, the caldera is a vast volcanic crater, especially one formed as a result of a massive eruption that led to the collapse of the mouth of a volcano. The Yellowstone hotspot is basically the creator of Old Faithful and the rest of the hot springs and mud pots for which the national park is famous. Speaking of Old Faithful, let's make a small detour and pay more attention to this wonder of nature. It's one of the most well-known geysers in the world. People have been coming from all over the globe to see it for more than a century. The cool thing about this geyser is that the likes of it can only form under very specific conditions. That's why they're pretty rare. Magma under the surface superheats pockets of underground water. The pressure there keeps growing until it eventually pushes the water upward with immense strength. A certain volcanic rock with a high silica content lines the tunnel through which this water escapes. Basically, it creates a unique pipe that can withstand unbelievable pressure and heat created by the water erupting above the ground. Old Faithful was the very first named geyser in Yellowstone. If you come to visit it expecting the thing to erupt every hour on the hour, you're gonna be disappointed. On average, Old Faithful erupts every 91 minutes or so, which isn't that bad either. Plus, you can download a special app which will provide you with the approximate time of the next eruption. But be very careful while visiting and stay away from the site. The water erupting from the powerful geyser reaches 204 degrees Fahrenheit. The steam is even more scorching, up to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. It's hot enough to bake a cake. But let's get back to our volcanic hotspots. Scientists still don't clearly understand why there aren't many hotspot volcanoes on continental crust. One reason might be that the continental crust is much thicker than the oceanic crust, which is about 4 times as thick on average. Another reason could be that most of Earth's crust, about 2/3 of it, is oceanic. This means that there's less continental crust for hotspots to form under. Now, I bet those of you living in Arizona will appreciate the following info. We'll talk about a volcanic field right in the heart of this state, the San Francisco Volcanic Field. That's a massive area filled with over 600 volcanoes. Yes, they're mostly small, but it doesn't make them any less impressive. They're scattered across 1,800 square miles in northern Arizona, a giant territory. Interestingly, scientists are still debating about whether this volcanic field is actually sitting on top of a hotspot. But one thing they agree upon, the volcanoes in this area get younger as you move east. And this pattern matches up with the North American plate moving west over what could be a stationary hotspot beneath the surface of our planet. Cool, huh? The volcanic hullabaloo in that area started around 6 million years ago. So, in geological terms, it's relatively young. As for the most recent eruption, it happened less than 1,000 years ago. The Sunset Crater, which I mentioned before, the one near Flagstaff, is the most famous vent from that eruption. the Sinagua people had to leave their homes at Wupatki Pueblo because of the eruption. That site is now part of the Wupatki National Monument. There, you can see how people lived in this volcanic region many years ago. If you go to explore this area, you'll notice that most of the volcanoes there are basalt cinder cones, small and steep. The Colorado Plateau has quite dry weather conditions. That's why the volcanoes haven't worn down much. Some of the best examples of those cones, like this one, called the SP crater, still look like they appeared yesterday. But look around. It's not just cinder cones. The San Francisco volcanic field also has a stratovolcano, as well as some lava domes that formed from volcanic rocks with more silica than basalt you can find in places like Hawaii. It means they're thicker and don't flow as easily. Anyway, the stratovolcano is going to be one of the most epic sights you'll come across while exploring this volcanic field. Well, not the stratovolcano itself, but the San Francisco peaks, the remains of that giant formation. They stand tall at more than 12,600 feet. That's 4.5 Burj Khalifas placed on top of one another. It makes the peaks some of the biggest landmarks in northern Arizona. They're not only stunning, but also sacred to the Native American people who have lived in the area for many generations. Now, unlike those super active volcanoes in Hawaii, the San Francisco volcanic field takes its time, thousands of years between eruptions. But you shouldn't relax just yet. Geologists say another eruption is likely to happen one day. It will probably occur in the remote eastern part of the field, away from big towns. Phew! And if that next eruption is anything like the one that formed Sunset Crater, it would be quite the show. Lava fountains and rivers of lava flowing. At the same time, the next eruption might not happen for centuries, maybe even millennia. Until then, the San Francisco volcanic field will remain a hidden gem of volcanic history, waiting for its next fiery performance. The South Pole is more than penguins and endless snow. There's a hidden ghost world within it. Look, it's right here on the globe. Don't confuse Antarctica with the Arctic, which is at the top of our maps. Much smaller in size, and, let's face it, way less mysterious. The ice sheet covering Antarctica is about 1 to 3 miles thick, which is up to 16 Eiffel Towers stacked on each other. This massive blanket hides the true features and contours of Antarctica's land. We still don't know much about this mysterious continent, and it is ice and snow that are to blame. We still don't even know the true shape and size of this continent. Mapping Antarctica without some huge shovels is an incredibly hard task. But satellites learned to penetrate the ice with their cameras. And now we know there's actually an enormous, dramatic ancient landscape beneath the snow. The ghost of the past. About 90 million years ago, Antarctica was a much warmer place. It was actually a lush rainforest with tons of plants and probably teeming with life. It even had rivers flowing through it. Then the ice came. This happened about 34 million years ago, during the transition from the Eocene to the Oligocene, when our planet cooled significantly. It was the beginning of one of our several ice ages. The land remained, but now was hidden under ice and snow that got thicker and thicker. To a regular eye, Antarctica turned into a white desert, vast, flat, and featureless. Time went on. This massive ice sheet moved around, smoothing and shifting the ground beneath it. Over the millions of years, it changed what the land looked like. Now, if we looked under the ice, it wouldn't hold any signs of the original South Pole, except for one place. In areas where the ice is especially thick and doesn't move much, like in East Antarctica, it has actually worked the other way around. It became like a super thick blanket that protects the land. Normally, things like wind or rain slowly wear away the ground over time, changing its shape. But since we have this protective ice blanket, it prevents these natural processes from reaching the stuff underneath. So, the ground stayed almost the same for millions of years, like it's been frozen in time. This special area near the Aurora and Schmidt subglacial basins has become the ghost of Antarctica's landscape. This place was barely touched even since it was first covered in snow 34 million years ago. This is a historical footprint, a place that can tell us what Antarctica's ground looked like before it became a freezing nightmare. As scientists peered under East Antarctica, they saw an amazing ghost. The traces of the rivers that were flowing there millions of years ago, various valleys, and some weird little islands, as well as 3 big chunks of land shaped like the letter U. Hey, what's that all about? You see, the continents on our planet are moving constantly, sliding along the red-hot lava mantle like cereal on milk. Over history, they came together and broke apart several times. Hundreds of millions of years ago, several continents were a part of one enormous Gondwana. Antarctica was one of them. It used to be one huge landmass. But when Gondwana broke apart, the poor continent got stretched by tectonic forces. Parts of land were pulled away from each other. Whoosh! And they got torn apart. And that's how we got these big chunks or blocks of land under thick layers of ice. In any case, scientists now want to explore this ghost a bit more. But to study it deeply, they need to actually drill down through the ice, like using a straw to get to the bottom of a thick shake. This will help them pick up some rocks and dirt from way below to learn more about the Earth's history and climate. Antarctica is the 5th largest continent in the world, approximately bigger than the entirety of Europe or Australia, competing with the entire South America in size. Aside from East Antarctica, we discussed there are several more regions: Antarctica Peninsula, South Pole, West Antarctica, and the Ross Sea. The continent is basically a frozen sandbox, and all its hidden, mysterious landscape is actually less explored than Mars's terrain. We only know for sure that without ice, it wouldn't just be flat and empty, but an entire world full of big mountains, huge canyons, and even fiery volcanoes. Some of these volcanoes are so huge that they peak above the layers of snow. In West Antarctica alone, there are at least 138 volcanoes, though only about 8 or 9 are active today. One of the craziest ones is Mount Erebus, the southernmost volcano and the tallest one on the continent, about 12,500 feet high. And deep beneath the ice sheet, this guy hosts incredible, beautiful subvolcanic caves. The temperatures there are warm enough for t-shirts. The Antarctic Peninsula, or Lesser Antarctica, looks like a bunch of mountainous islands deeply underground. It has newer volcanic rocks that are part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is like a giant circle of volcanoes and earthquake zones around the Pacific Ocean. The Greater Antarctica is a huge part, almost as big as Australia. It consists of East Antarctica and the South Pole. Beneath the ice, it's a place of rocks that have been around for a very, very long time, including the special zone we mentioned. You probably know that Antarctica is nearly devoid of humans. No wonder, with a mean temperature of about -46 degrees Fahrenheit. But even though this place is horrifyingly cold and deserted, life still clings on. You guessed it, in the underworld. In 2017, scientists found DNA traces of algae, moss, and even possibly unknown small animals in the deep caves. That means that even in such crazy conditions, there are still unique ecosystems thriving in little isolated warm pockets beneath the snow. There was another incredible find beneath Antarctica's Ross Ice Shelf, a lively ecosystem vibing within an underground river. Scientists have long suspected that Antarctica's underworld should have some freshwater lakes and rivers. One day, a satellite spotted a groove there. They decided to explore it and used a hot water drill to melt their way through the ice. As they reached the underworld, they dropped a camera into one of those hidden fresh rivers. And at first, they thought they'd find just some rocks or something. But instead, they stumbled upon hundreds of amphipods, tiny shrimp-like creatures. Little ones instantly swarmed around the lens. Shrimps blocked the camera and scientists couldn't check out what they wanted to. Pretty funny, but at least that means that there really is an important ecosystem deep within Antarctica. Now, they're gonna explore it. And all this is just the beginning of the mysterious underworld. Antarctica's snow also hides the deepest canyon on Earth under the Denman Glacier. Well, Mariana Trench is still the deepest point on Earth, but it's a part of the oceanic crust, geologically speaking. Also, in 1958, explorers found a huge mountain range under the ice, as big and tall as the famous Alps Mountains. The range stretched for about 745 miles with peaks as high as 1.7 miles. And all this magnificence is buried under tons of ice. Who knows what else we might find there? Antarctica holds about 60% of our entire planet's fresh water, which means it would be pretty bad if it melted. For example, there's this Doomsday Glacier, officially known as Thwaites Glacier. It's a huge ice formation, about the size of Florida, and it's melting right now. Every year, the sea levels rise by 4% because of it. If this guy melts away completely, the sea levels all around the world will increase by 2 feet, which might not sound like a lot, but it would be catastrophic for coastal areas. Luckily, researchers have found that even if its ice shelf were to collapse in the next 50 years, the glacier itself wouldn't retreat as quickly as they feared. It's still losing ice rapidly, but it would be quite a slow process. These dark patches on Greenland's ice sheet aren't just any old stains. Every summer, the ice, which is usually bright white, turns murky gray in certain areas. This so-called dark zone was a huge mystery for a long time, until some studies discovered that this weird transformation was connected to the odd appearance of red, green, and brown-colored algae. The scariest part is that this algae bloom keeps growing. The dark zone is getting darker, and terrifying microbes might start appearing. Now, the rest of the world should be concerned. The Greenland ice sheet is like a massive ice blanket that covers around 80% of the island. It's so thick that it holds about 8% of the world's freshwater ice. For most of the year, the ice looks like a giant untouched white sheet stretching over the land. But when summer rolls around and temperatures start to rise, things begin to change. The ice melts, revealing rocky areas along the coast. And as you move further inland, that once smooth white ice becomes darker. This is the dark zone, and it covers an area of around 248 miles in length and 62 miles at its widest point. This weird phenomenon happens basically for 2 reasons. The first one is black carbon. Just like dust that builds up on your bookshelf, the ice in Greenland has the same issue. The wind carries a mix of dust and soot to this icy area. But unlike your bookshelf, you can't just wipe it off with a cloth. In Greenland's case, this dirty mix settles on the ice and sticks around for thousands of years. So, the dark zone is basically covered in a fine layer of dust that's built up over time. Back in 2014, researchers analyzed this dirty mix and found that the darker ice areas were filled with black carbon. This black carbon didn't just appear out of thin air. Well, actually, it sorta did. Scientists believe it mostly comes from smoke produced by wildfires in northern Canada and Alaska somewhere in the past. As you might guess, black carbon is black, which is why it makes the ice look darker. Now, the second big reason for the Greenland ice sheet's summer makeover has to do with those algae we mentioned earlier. We're mostly talking about 2 types of it, the Ansilonema alaskana and the Ansilonema nordenskjoldii. Both of them love cold water regions. During winter, they stay in a dormant state deep within the ice. But when spring comes, they start to slowly migrate to the surface. By the time summer hits, they're ready to bloom and soak up nearly 24 hours of sunlight each day for photosynthesis and growth. Normally, these algae are green, but when exposed to sunlight, they turn brown as a natural way to protect themselves from harmful ultraviolet rays. And this color change is also what makes the ice in Greenland look darker. So far, this has been normal behavior. What's really alarming is that these algae blooms are getting bigger and bigger every year. This happens because they thrive on phosphorus, a nutrient that's plentiful out there and comes from a mineral called hydroxylapatite. This mineral is found in a type of rock that breaks down into tiny dust particles, which are then blown across the ice by the wind. As the climate gets warmer, the rocks dry out more, and stronger winds carry more dust. More dust means more phosphorus, leading to more algae growth. See? It is a cycle, and it keeps getting worse every year. Studying this is crucial to understanding why the dark zone keeps getting bigger. From the year 2000 to 2012, its size increased by 12%. But you might be wondering, why should we care? After all, it's just ice getting darker, right? Well, not exactly. Think about how you can't stand wearing black clothes on a hot, sunny day. They soak up the heat and make you feel even hotter. That's because darker surfaces absorb more sunlight. The same thing happens to ice. Together, dust, black carbon, and algae blooms are responsible for about 70% of the variability in albedo on the Greenland ice sheet. Albedo is just a fancy word for how reflective a surface is. If you take two surfaces, one white and shiny and the other dark and rough, the white one will reflect a lot of light and heat, giving it a high albedo. The dark one, on the other hand, will absorb more light and heat, so it has a low albedo. During the summer, the Greenland ice sheet experiences a reduction in albedo. This means the ice absorbs more sunlight, and when ice absorbs more sunlight, it melts faster than it should. This is why understanding what's happening in the dark zone is so important. It helps predict how quickly the Greenland ice sheet is melting and how it can affect the rest of the world. Greenland's ice sheet is the second largest in the world, covering an area about the size of all the land in the United States east of the Mississippi River. And its huge mass of ice averages a thickness of 1.4 miles. Unfortunately, the ice loss has skyrocketed. Back in the 1990s, Greenland was losing about 25 billion tons of ice per year. Now, it's losing around 234 billion tons per year. That's nearly 10 times more ice melting away each year. According to NASA, if all of Greenland's ice sheet were to melt, it would increase global sea levels by about 24 feet. That could be catastrophic for coastal countries and cities around the world. The Netherlands could be submerged, the Bahamas could be almost completely wiped out, and many of the Philippines Islands would be at risk of disappearing. All of this may seem like a distant reality, and it is true that most scientists believe it would take several hundred or even thousands of years for the ice sheet to melt completely. But it is important to know that Greenland didn't always have this thick layer of ice. Very recently, researchers took a close look at some sediment from the bottom of a 2-mile deep ice core extracted from the center of Greenland. They found that the soil had traces of willow wood, insect parts, fungi, and even poppy seeds. So these fossils are the first direct evidence that Greenland's ice sheet melted away in the recent geological past, around 400,000 years ago. At that time, Greenland was home to a green tundra landscape with insects and plants. This discovery is both fascinating and scary because it shows that the ice sheet collapsed before and might be more fragile than scientists originally thought. There is another concern too. A recent research collected meltwater from different spots on the Greenland ice sheet and found that the water samples were packed with hundreds and thousands of microbes. The concern is that they could be released into the ocean in the future. And some studies already suggest that areas near where a lot of glacial meltwater flows have a higher risk of viruses jumping to new hosts, like from animals to humans. Even though experts believe the chance of a doomsday virus coming from the glaciers is very small, it's still not zero. The truth is, we don't know much about the thousands of microbial species living on the surface of the ice, and there is simply not enough data to fully understand how dangerous these organisms might be. All of this might sound concerning, but we shouldn't panic just yet. There's still a lot we don't understand about what is darkening the Greenland ice sheet. We still need more detailed measurements of the relative abundance of dust, algae, and black carbon, as well as a better understanding of how these potentially dangerous microbes could affect our lives. The more we learn, the better we can predict what's going to happen and how we can prepare for it.
If you walk through this small stone doorway in Hierapolis, Turkey, you might never come back alive. Back in ancient times, people thought it was some sort of portal to the underworld. Romans would go in carrying perfectly healthy bulls, but after a few minutes, they would watch these animals collapse as if hit by some mysterious force. But what's even weirder is that nothing happened to people. They could walk in and out just fine. Now, recent studies might have an answer for these eerie happenings, and it all has to do with people's heights. The gate, known as Plutonium, named after Pluto, the deity of the underworld, is a stone doorway leading to a small 32-square-foot cave. But the real danger is what is going on beneath it. Hierapolis is a super active geological area, and there's a big crack under the city that constantly emits volcanic carbon dioxide, which comes up as a visible mist. During the day, the sun dissipates the gas. At night, the gas forms some kind of a carbon dioxide lake on the sheltered arena floor. At dawn, you need to get out of there before it's too late. This whole place can turn particularly life-threatening right before the sun rises, when the carbon dioxide concentration, about 15 inches above the arena floor, reaches 35%. That means birds, bulls, and even humans can suffocate and pass away in just a couple of minutes. But there is a scientific reason that explains how Romans could get out of there unharmed. The carbon dioxide concentration drops quickly with height, so animals perished while their handlers, being taller and standing up, could walk out and breathe safely. Most people can't stay inside the Bagarn fort after sunset. This 16th century fort, located about 146 miles from Delhi, is known as one of the most haunted places in India. During the day, the area is bustling with visitors who can walk through the main gate of this once grand fort city and check out the ruins of temples and palaces. But they will also see this big sign at the gate that dramatically warns everybody that all access is strictly forbidden after dark. That's probably because at night, according to locals, women can be heard screaming and crying in that place, along with the sounds of bangles breaking and strange music. Others have reported seeing shadowy figures and flashing lights among the ruins, or even smelling a strange perfume floating around. Yawata-no-Yabushirasu is one of Japan's most restricted forests, located in Ichikawa. The forest itself is a small area, covering just a little more than 40 square yards, and it is mostly a thick patch of mosu bamboo. Its location next to a parking lot and modern buildings makes it seem less intimidating. But don't be mistaken by its appearance. Since at least the 19th century, people have said that anyone who enters this forest is bound to disappear and never be seen again. So, as soon as you arrive, a sign near the forest tells you about its history and the curse believed to be linked to it. Some rumors suggest the creepy presence of an ancient samurai lord walking around. Other legends say that the forest hides a bottomless pit filled with poisonous gas. Whether these stories are true or not, today the area is enclosed by stone walls, and entry is still strictly prohibited. In a valley called the Dark Entry Forest in Connecticut, you will find Dudleytown, but you definitely shouldn't go inside. Not only has the land been private property since the 1920s, but it is also known as one of the spookiest places on Earth. This place was first settled in the early 1740s, and many of the original settlers were from the Dudley family. That's why it's called Dudleytown. There's a local rumor that the town's founders were descended from Edmund Dudley, an English nobleman who lost his life for treason. The legend says this curse followed the Dudley family all the way across the Atlantic to America, and their misfortune is said to be responsible for crop failures, mental problems, and several tragic incidents in the village. Again, it is all just rumors, since historians haven't found any real evidence to support these claims. Still, the pitch-black surroundings and the eerie Blair Witch Project vibe going on in that place fueled ghost stories in the 1980s. This led to many cases of vandalism in the following decade, and because of that, the landowners closed the area to the public. This old abandoned building used to be the fancy palace of King Farouk's family, who was the penultimate king of Egypt back in 1936. After his family members passed away, the palace was turned into a morgue. Locals say that today, the whole place is super creepy and off-limits. Some people have reported seeing light bulbs flicker and shadows move around, making strange noises. Once, a group of kids allegedly went inside and totally freaked out when they found all the doors had suddenly disappeared, leaving them in complete darkness. They had no choice but to start screaming for help. This Hawaiian island has been off-limits to people for over a century. It's called Ni'iau and is the smallest inhabited island in Hawaii, covering around 69.5 square miles. It has around 84 residents. The island doesn't have cell phone service, paved roads, or power lines, just solar panels for electricity. A single family has privately owned the island since 1864, when a Scottish farmer bought it for $10,000, which would be around $250,000 today. The island has stayed in the family, passing down to its descendants, the Robinsons. They have kept it private ever since, so access is highly restricted and basically by invitation only. The Hessdalen tunnels are a network of about 2,000 mysterious underground passageways mainly found in Central Europe, especially in Austria and Bavaria. These tunnels are usually narrow and cramped, often just wide enough for one person to squeeze through at a time, and they are believed to date back to the Middle Ages, as far back as the 12th century. What's really puzzling about these tunnels is their purpose. Despite a lot of research, nobody really knows why they were built. There is a theory that they were used for storage, but since many of them are below the waterline and occasionally get filled with water, that doesn't seem very practical. These tunnels have very light, almost claustrophobic sections and sudden drops, which doesn't seem practical for other straightforward uses like escape routes, hiding places, or even spiritual purposes. To make things even more mysterious, there is a complete lack of artifacts, which makes it even harder for researchers to figure out what these tunnels were really for. Since 2019, adventurous people can get arrested if they try to climb this rock. Uluru, also known as Ayers Rock, has been off-limits because it is now considered a sacred site for local communities. But the fact that it is also extremely dangerous probably played a big role in the decision to close it off to visitors. This rock is 1,142 feet high, which is about the height of an 80-story building. The climb to the summit can be very slippery, and high temperatures, which can hit 116 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, have led to people passing away from dehydration and heat-related issues. Something even creepier happens at the top of the rock right after storms. When it rains, small tadpole-like crustaceans called shield shrimp hatch in temporary waterholes and rock pools on top of Uluru. These extraterrestrial-looking creatures are about 3 inches long, and they spread their super-resilient eggs everywhere. When enough summer rain comes, they hatch and go wild, feeding on microorganisms and bacteria in the water. How these strange creatures end up in the fleeting pools on top of Uluru is still unclear, but the most likely explanation is that their eggs might travel there with the wind.